The gospel reading this morning comes from Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. And just like the portions that we have been reading the past several Sundays, we can't help but wonder, is Jesus really serious about what he says? Do not resist an evildoer. Really? If someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other cheek also? Come on. If anyone wants you to sue you and take your coat, give your cloak as well? In the winter? Give to anyone who begs from you, and do not refuse anyone who wants to borrow from you. Get real. Tom Long of Emory University writes in his commentary about this portion of Jesus' teaching this: "It boggles the mind to think about living out this example literally in a contemporary society. Imagine a Christian living in New York City who got up one morning and decided to do exactly what Jesus says, to turn the other cheek, to give to every beggar, and to respond to every lawsuit by settling out of court for double the amount. This person would be broke, homeless, and in the hospital before noon. But if that weren't enough, Jesus finishes this part of his sermon with a bang. He says, "You have heard it said that you should love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemy and pray for those who persecute you." Now, I can hear Jesus' followers' objections then and now. I can hear what you're thinking, because I'm thinking the same. How is it possible to do these things? And what's love got to do with it anyway? Jesus is describing here the kingdom of heaven, where there will be no more fighting, no more violence, no more war, no more pain, no more suffering, no more crying, but perfect love. And we pray in the Lord's Prayer every Sunday, right? Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And sometimes our prayer is answered, and we get a glimpse of God's heavenly kingdom here on earth. And some people have helped bring about God's kingdom on heaven here on earth, and have shown us the way to live by Jesus' radical words of love. People like Mahatma Gandhi. He was a leader who was inspired by Jesus to follow nonviolent civil disobedience and led his country of India to independence and inspired freedom movements all over the world. And he says this: "The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others." Mother Teresa, who is now Saint Teresa, was a poor nun and missionary worker who showed love to the poorest of the poor in Calcutta. And one day, as she was cleaning out a maggot-infested wound of a man, a reporter was watching in amazement. And he said, "I wouldn't do what you do for $1 million. And she turned, and with a wry smile, she said, "Neither would I." And of course, Martin Luther King Jr., who we're thinking about this month even more so than ever for Black History Month. He was a minister who inspired the civil rights movement in America and helped African Americans find civil rights and freedoms in this country. And he said, "Love is the only force capable of transforming an enemy into a friend." So we recognize these extraordinary people, right? They're bigger than life. Gandhi, Mother Teresa, who's a saint now, Martin Luther King Jr. We recognize these extraordinary people that somehow we're able to live according to Jesus' law of love. But what about ordinary people like you and like me? How do we do it? What's love got to do with it anyway? Everything. Because without love, my friends, none of it is possible. This past week, I was amazed at the number of ordinary people doing ordinary acts of love that made a difference in the lives of others. Jesus says, "But I say to you, if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also." Now, a strike on the cheek can be a form of abuse. So I want to be very clear that you hear what I'm saying. If you are being hit at home, don't turn the other cheek and stay for more. Jesus did not condone violence. He advocated love. So let's think about this in a little different way. If you get an email or a text or see a Facebook post or maybe even a tweet, and that's as far as my knowledge goes. So if you get any of those that are mean or hurtful, it is so easy, too easy, to respond immediately without thinking with an equally mean and hurtful retaliatory remark, right? We've all done it, regretfully so. But there's a woman I know who has had a hard time being on Facebook lately because she said all that she sees every day are these very mean-spirited posts, especially about the person, the candidate for president that she didn't vote for. And she is so tempted every day to make another response that would be equally hurtful about the person that she didn't vote for. But instead, she tried something different. She decided to make a post about love. It was inclusive, it was non-judgmental and kind, and she put it out there. And in so doing, she changed the conversation online, at least for a day. Jesus says, "But I say to you, if anyone wants to sue you and take your coat, give your cloak as well." Let's think about this. Our coat or our cloak keeps us warm, especially on winter days, right? And not only does it keep us warm, but it protects us. It provides a sense of security for us. So when we take off our coat, all of a sudden we're vulnerable to the elements and to anything else. So taking off our coat is as if we're stepping out of our comfort zone. Well, this past Monday, a group of youth gathered together here at the church, and with the help of Melanie and some other adults, they prepared a meal. And they took it down to the Pleasant Valley Men's Shelter on the north side, which is a neighborhood that looks and feels very different than our own. They, in effect, took off their coat, stepped out of their comfort zone, and served a meal to homeless people. And not just that, but they took with them little red pieces of paper, Valentines, on which we had written some words of love. And they carefully put them at each of the table settings around the tables. So that night, the men were not only given warm and nourishing food, but they received words of love. Jesus says, "But I say to you, if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go also the 2nd mile." My 15-year-old son, Christian, is on the Quaker Valley basketball team. And his coach is pretty intense. They have practice every day. They do drills. They work out, an equivalent to be a mile at least. And the season has been a full one. They started in November, and they just made the playoffs, and so the season continues. They keep running their miles. But that's not enough. You see, this coach is not just about making good basketball players. He wants to make good people, fine young men. And so he, with the help of some parents, organized a service day. And last Saturday, we went to Allegheny Valley School in Coraopolis. And it is a home for children and adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Most of the residents are in wheelchairs and cannot speak. But that didn't stop these young men. They went the extra mile. They reached out, they reached down, they helped them make valentines, they played games with them, and they made them smile and laugh. And as we were leaving, the staff said that they really haven't seen the residents so filled with joy in a long time. These young men gave their time and they gave their love. Jesus says, "But I say to you, give to everyone who begs from you, and do not refuse anyone who wants to borrow from you." I met someone this past week, a man who came to see me to tell me about his little organization that he has started, where he collects money and gives it away to people in need. Local people, people here in our community who have received cancer diagnoses, who are unemployed, most recently the Milbert family whose house was destroyed by fire in which their daughter Hannah died. So he goes out and he finds people with big hearts and not so small wallets, and he collects money. And then he gives it away, no questions asked, before the people can even ask. And he does not make them beg. He lives his faith through generous acts of love. Jesus says, "But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." Jesus saved the hardest for last. Right? It's easy to love people we love, people that are like us, people that we enjoy being with. And it's even easy to love those who are victims of some sort, in need of help, right? That's easy. But someone who has hurt us? An enemy? That's really, really hard. Well, I admit that I am not as diligent as I have been about reading the newspaper every day, listening to NPR on the radio, checking the Associated Press app on my cell phone several times a day. You see, for me, the news these days is just so overwhelmingly bad and frustrating and depressing. And my job is to keep faith and hope alive. But I am a concerned citizen, and so I try to keep up with the news every couple of days. And so this past Monday, I sat down and read the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette from cover to cover. Started with the local news. It was pretty bad. Went to the national news. It was getting worse. Went to the international page. And here are some of the headlines I read. Brazil's huge corruption scandal spreading to the rest of Latin America. Police brutality, protests turned violent in Paris. North Korean nuclear test aggravates concerns in Washington. Slow going for Turkish-backed forces in northern Syria. But in the midst of such grim news, I saw a picture right there in the middle of the page. It was a man painting hearts on the street. The caption read, "An Iraqi Kurdish man spray paints hearts Sunday in anticipation of Valentine's Day in a street in Arbil, the capital of the Kurdish Autonomous Region in northern Iraq." This picture for me was worth 1,000 words. Here in a part of the world that has known such war and hostility, this man was refusing to give in to hate. He was spray painting hearts, and the best part was that the paint was overflowing, was spraying onto the road. It was everywhere. In a place of hate, with a simple and some might say foolish action, he was witnessing to the power of love. When I saw the picture, I recalled the words of Martin Luther King Jr., who said, "I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word." And I was filled with faith and hope and love all over again. So what's love got to do with it? Everything. Ordinary people performing ordinary acts of love can change the world for good. One place, one person, one heart at a time. Thanks be to God.